Bam, let's go. Brandon from Tinfoil Tales. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you for having me.
I recently found out about your YouTube channel and found it quite interesting. It's always great to meet someone new that also deals with all this awesome woo-woo shit.
Yeah,
Why don't you tell me about yourself and the Tinfoil Tales?
sure, not a problem. Basically, I started the podcast about a year and a half ago. I think the first episode came out September of 2022. And I had an experience years ago that I never came to terms with it. I tried to write it off as something rational, and it's really hard to rationalize something that makes zero sense, but you look for whatever reason you can to try and understand it. And because I'm a skeptic. And it's really hard for someone that's a skeptic to acknowledge that there is some weird shit out there that you just cannot explain. And for 17 years, I have been dealing with that. But about 15 years ago, I had this experience and I never felt like I could talk about it because literally it's crazy. And I wanted to reach out to other people to try and talk to them. I say this maybe is selfish in my own stuff, but like if I could talk with other people that had the same experiences, maybe it'd make me feel better and helping them feel better too. So like mutually beneficial. So that's kind of where I came up with the concept of it, and it's just grown since then.
Awesome. Tell me about your experience. What was it about?
Back in 2007, I was coming home from work and I worked third shift at a warehouse, and the vehicle in front of me ended up being my coworker, and I don't know if I knew it was my coworker, if it wasn't I don't think I knew it was my coworker. There's just a vehicle in front of me, but he swerved and he went off the edge of the road. Then he came back up on the road, and I was like, "What is this guy doing?" And as I'm getting closer, I see what looks like a person walking in the middle of the road, but it's not a person. It's as I got closer to it, there's a large black shape, but I don't see a head and I don't see any arms. It's literally like a big. I thought it was like a person wrapped in a blanket, and the way it's taking a step, its body was kind of twitchy, glitchy looking. It didn't look natural. So I thought it was like a drunk person stumbling around in the middle of the road at like 4:30 in the morning. Well, I too had to swerve over a little bit, get off to the edge so I could continue to walk right down the like pathway of the road. And as it walked past again, I never seen its head. I didn't see any arms. And I'm in a Ford Explorer, so it's like 5.5 feet tall. This thing goes right past my window, and I'm trying to look up to see. I don't see the top of it. So it had to have been at least 6.5 to 7 feet tall, standing upright. That is a really big, if it was a person, that was a really big person. But when it gets behind the vehicle, I can see like where the taillights are illuminating it too. I can see the ground between its legs, like when it would take a step and then, like it was blocking off the light. So it wasn't translucent. It wasn't like a shadow, but like when it walked past the window, I didn't see any definitive features. It was literally solid black. There was no fur, there was no clothing, there was no details to it. So I just took off. I hit the gas, went off. Well, right up the road, I seen the car just pulled in this parking lot, and then that's my coworker, so I pull up next to him, and I roll down my window because he's rolling down his. His eyes are all like bulged out because he's like, he just seen this, and he's like, "Did you fucking see that?" I'm like, "Yeah, what was it?" He's like, "It didn't have a fucking head." I was like, "I have no idea what this was. Like, it's crazy. Like, it doesn't make any sense." I was like, "But I want to go back and look at it." And he's like, "What?" I was like, "We need to go back." I was like, "Clearly there's something in the road. There's some shit, like crazy shit going on. We need to go back and see what this thing is." So I drove in front. He followed me behind, and we get back to the same spot. It's literally maybe less than a quarter mile away from where we pulled off. So it's not even that far. But I don't see the thing in the road anymore walking, but there is something laying across the road, and it looks like a large black dog, which wasn't there earlier because we would have ran it over. You know what I mean? It was laying in the middle of the road, like it wasn't there. So the first thing I'm thinking of was clearly must have been what was in the road, but still trying to like, why would this? It doesn't make any sense. So I stop about 30 feet from it. My headlights are shining on it. And this dog is just laying with his back like facing us. So I just see the back. I see the long tail. I see the bushiness of its fur or whatever. And it's just laying there. It looks like it's dead. So I start to get out of my vehicle and he pulls up behind me and he's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Well, there's a dead dog up here." So I start to walk towards it. And as I'm about 15 feet from it, about halfway between my vehicle and it, its head lifts up off the ground and turns back. My headlights are shining, so its eyes are like reflecting the headlight. And this thing growls at me.
Mm.
And I'm like, "Oh shit, it's not dead." Like it's like one of those moments of like, "Uh-oh, what are you gonna do?" Well, it starts to like try and stand up, and it does like a little bit of a stumble, and then it stands directly up. And by that, I don't mean on like four legs. I mean it stood up like a person. Like we're eye to eye. I'm 6'3", and this thing is looking me dead in the eyes, 15 feet from me, right in my headlights. The way its front legs should have been, like I've seen dogs do this, like where they hop around and then you see how their arms and stuff, like their legs and stuff, kind of like bend. This thing didn't do that. It literally, they just hung down to its side, almost like a human would. And I've tried to write it off as like an irrational explanation at first. Like, is this a person in like a werewolf costume? Like, it doesn't make like the features of it does not seem like a normal dog, but everything about it was a normal dog. It didn't have like humanoid hands like what we do, like the typical werewolf depictions. It didn't have any of that. Like, it was all puffy fur. It's almost like one of those chow dogs where the fur is really, really puffy, but its face is very, like, it's got the elongated face, almost like a German Shepherd or a wolf. It was all solid black, really puffy fur, big puffy tail. But I've never seen a dog stand up on its back legs like a human because it didn't look like it was struggling to stand up on two legs because it stood directly up like a human would. That is insane crap. Like, there's no explanation for that. And we're staring at each other for just a few seconds, and he kind of crouches back down and goes off to the side of the road. He didn't use his front legs when he went off. He kneeled down like in that weird crouch position, but he still walked on two legs as he left. So at this point, when it stood up and like when it growled or whatever, I heard my coworker, I forgot to mention this, it's funny. He yells, "Get back in the car, you fucking idiot." Because I mean, I wish I would have probably done that, but I was too like focused on this animal standing up. Like I was still so confused by it. Like it didn't make any sense to me. Well, next to where we're at, this is a deer preserved area. Like basically there's 2 square miles, which isn't super big, but for the area, like it's all wooded off at the time. And they had deer in there and they used to have like celebrity, like country music people would come out and hunt these deer. Like I don't, basically they'd give them all sorts of, growth hormones, I think, because they made them have these monstrous buck racks or whatever. So people come out, pay big money to go hunting. The guy that owned the place actually got arrested at one point for it and he went to prison. But this was going on. So this whole area had like this big fence that wrapped around the whole 2 mile square radius. The fence was 8 foot tall. I didn't see this thing go through the fence or over the fence or under. It just like went towards where the fence was and it was gone, like it vanished. That doesn't make any sense to me how something just disappears, especially almost 6.5 feet tall.
Damn.
Like, where the hell did it go? And at this point, like when it's gone, I walk back to my vehicle. So I'm getting the hell out of here. At this point, I don't know where this thing's at. Well, at this point, my coworker had gotten out of his vehicle. He's standing next to mine, and we're talking about like what in the hell is going on? And I happen to glance down on the ground and standing between us, and this is the weirdest part to me. There is a random little field mouse standing on the ground. And he's between my coworker and I, but he's also on his hind legs, but he's doing this. Like he's wiping its face. He's all wet looking. And it's like it's cleaning itself. Like it's using its front paws to wipe its fur, like rub its fur and everything else. And like it's all wet. So I look at my coworker, I'm like, do you see this? Like, what is this? I'm like, I took my foot and I push it. And it just keeps cleaning itself. It doesn't even care that I touched it. I don't know of any wild mouse that would stand in between two humans anyways, let alone when you touch it, it doesn't freak out. Has no reaction at all. Now I know if you I've encountered stuff here in my house, like where I've put in like rodent repellents or whatever, and they eat like some of the poison. Like if they're dying or whatever, they act different. Like their brains are screwed up. They act a little different. So maybe that has nothing to do with what just went on. Maybe it's something that ate some sort of poison somewhere and just so happened to stroll out in the middle of the street between us. I don't know. It's weird timing. But if you look at all the things that just happened, the first thing we saw didn't have any definitive features, but it was on two legs. Now, this dog thing was standing up on two legs and walked off on two legs. And now there's a mouse standing here on two legs,
Hmm.
all within like a 3 to 4 minute time span. That's a lot of random stuff going on in such a small amount of time in the same exact area. So at this point, I told my coworker, like, dude, I'm going home. Like, I'm done. I don't know what the hell's going on, but I'm going home. So we drove off. He went his way. I went my way. And the next morning, I got up and I drew like the picture of this dog thing because I'm thinking werewolf, because obviously back in 2007, and I didn't. What's the first thing you're going to think of? You see a humanoid looking dog, oh, werewolf. So I get on like one of these old forums or whatever back in those days, and I scanned the picture, I put it online, and people started commenting on it. One of them said it was a Michigan dog man. I'm like, what is a Michigan dog man? Never heard of that before. So I started looking into it, and basically the descriptions of everything aside, again, like the feature that didn't have the hands or whatever. I guess dogmen don't have tails. This thing had a tail. Everything about it was like a normal dog, even proportionate size for how tall it, like the size of it was a lot bigger than a normal dog, but everything about it was proportionate. And I got all this information. I go back to work a couple nights later and I try and talk to my coworker about it. I like printed out this thing. I'm like, this is literally like what we saw, this and that. Well, people started laughing because they overheard me talking about it. And they're like, oh, you ran over a werewolf, and like trying to poke fun. So it makes my coworker mad and at me for talking about it in front of people. So he pulls me aside and basically threatens me and says I need to knock it off. He doesn't want people thinking he's crazy. He doesn't want anything to do with it. He's going to deny it. Doesn't want to talk about it. He said it was just a dog. All it was a dog. Don't worry about it. So for 15 years, I said, okay, it's just a dog. Because the other person that's seen all the craziness doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't want to verify anything. So I accepted. I just said it was a dog playing with a mouse. He must have got hit by a car, broke his front legs, and somehow in the matter of a few minutes, he learned to walk on his hind legs.
Hmm.
Like the explainable version of that is even stupider sounding than the crazy, the woo woo side of it. Like, so I don't know.
Absolutely, absolutely. I I find it really interesting the thing with the mouse. So it could be possible that the phenomena affected the mouse. That's why it acted strangely.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be. I I recently heard about the theory of distortion. Have you heard about it?
No.
I heard about it for the first time a few days ago in an interview with a book author here from Germany. The theory says that, for example, the UFO phenomenon actively creates a distorted representation of things we observe, strange things,
Mm-hmm.
like, for example, UFOs or cryptids, or perhaps other paranormal things. They ensure that we do not perceive the real phenomena, but a distorted representation or version of it. That's what the theory says. I find it very interesting. That means that many witness reports from people who claim they've seen UFOs or even had a close encounter or have been abducted could have been influenced by the phenomena itself. The phenomena actively influences us who observe it.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe whatever it is doesn't want us to observe it in its pure form. It puts on a
Yeah.
mask for us. That's what the theory says. It puts on a mask for us. The question is why. I find it very interesting, and I really find it interesting the thing with the mouse, like you and like you said, it's too much random stuff in a short amount of time. That's crazy. I heard stories about the dogman too. What do you think about the theory of distortion?
I've actually heard, I haven't heard it called that before, but someone told me that they think what happened was we were abducted, and these were just the memories they put into our brain to mask what was going on. I was like, if that's the truth, why wouldn't they have given us something if we just kept driving and we were like, why they made it so weird that I'm gonna remember? You know what I mean? So I don't know if I believe in the aspect of being abducted because we weren't missing time or anything like that. But the distortion thing does kind of make sense because I think our brains naturally have a way of masking some of the things that we go through in life anyways. Like some people have traumatic events and sometimes they don't remember them exactly of how things happen. Like every person has their own version of an event. So maybe what happened to me, I just remember the bits and pieces of it, but maybe there was more to it that I don't remember, or maybe there was more, you see what I'm saying? Like, so as far as the distortion part of it, I could see where that would be an easy thing to happen. Like if they already can tap into people's brain waves to where they can make things not seem we can't see what we're actually seeing. It wouldn't be hard to manifest something to where it's even more out of the ordinary just to try and draw away the attention to what we're actually witnessing.
Yeah. A psychologist once told me, and had him on the podcast, he once told me that it's pretty easy to create false memories. It's
Yeah.
fairly easy to do that. So, yeah,
That's why I'm a little skeptical when it comes to ever dealing with a hypnotist because I'm afraid they're going to implant memories in there that wasn't really there. I don't know if that's. I've talked to a few, I've interviewed a few. They say that they don't do stuff like that. I was like, yeah, but you have that ability. And I don't trust people very well.
right. Me too. I'm also a skeptic. I deal with a lot of stuff just like that. The story you told me a few minutes ago, I heard tons of these stories. And I experienced stuff myself. I've seen a UFO when I was only 16 years old. It was back in 1996. And I've seen a triangle shaped UFO, but I don't know what it was. So I tend not to think about it too much. I can't explain it. So why
It's
break
one
my
of
head
those
over it?
it's one of those things though, like when you witness something and as much as you try not to think about it, you still kind of think about it. Cause that's even with my experience, like it's always in the back of my head. And someone's asked, well, how did that affect you? I was like, well, it didn't have any effect on me. I do a podcast where I interview people that have the same type of experiences that I did. So clearly it had an effect on me. I just didn't think about it in that aspect. Like it bothers me knowing that I'll never actually know what went on. Like
Right.
no matter what I do, no matter who I talk to, whatever, I've never had an experience like that again. I've never had one beforehand. I never had one again. I still live within 4 miles of this area and I've never seen anything like that again. So I drive up and down that road all the time. Never seen anything out of the ordinary.
Mm.
So knowing of what I'd saw, I would so much rather have just been like, never have seen it at all. But some people say you see things for reasons. They put you on a path of what you're doing. This is what you were supposed to be doing. And I'm like, I don't know if I subscribe to that, but sure. I mean, if that helps me continue to help other people, like by talking with other people and someone else enjoys listening to what I do, or someone else feels more comfortable talking to somebody because they had a strange experience and they're afraid to talk to people about it, they can talk to me because I don't judge anyone. I'm not here to prove or disprove anybody. I'm just here to give people a place to talk. And if it helps them and it's helping me, I don't see a problem with it.
You are absolutely right. We think about it though.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we say we don't try, we try not to think about it too much, but we think about it a lot. And this is why we do a podcast like this, when we interview people. I do it too. You do it. It's because we try to find answers. We
Yeah.
want answers for ourselves. We want to help people, of course. I want to help people too. I want to give people a platform where they can talk about their UFO experiences, well, maybe encounters with cryptids or even close encounters with aliens, alleged aliens or UFOs, stuff like that, the paranormal. But I want answers. Of course, I want answers. It also bothers me that I do not know what it was. I saw triangle
Mm-hmm.
UFO in the sky. And it behaved very strangely. It moved like crazy, man. It was very strange. And I've never seen stuff like that before. It was back in 1996. I'm not aware of drones back in 1996. I don't know if we had drones that could do stuff like that, but I don't think so. So, yeah, I want answers, man. And now with all the stuff that's going on over there where you at in the States with David Grush and the whistleblower stuff, I think we came a little bit closer.
Yeah. I, being the person that I am, like the whole tinfoil tales thing is back in 2020 when there was a lot of weird stuff going on in the world, anyways.
Hmm.
Me and my friend were talking about all sorts of like things, and I won't dive into it because there's certain words you don't want to say. But when you have all this free time because you can't really do anything, uh, I started talking about doing a podcast, and I come up with the name Tinfoil Tales because we talked about a lot of conspiracy type stuff and how government overreach and all sorts of things like that. And I came up with the name to do the podcast, and I never done it, but like the whole tinfoil thing came from, well, you're a conspiracy person. Oh, you talk about conspiracies, this and that. And I feel like with technology, I think the governments and the militaries, they have all this technology that we don't know about. Back in, you said 96, there's a lot of triangular crafts being seen back then. If you go back before that, there was a lot more weird shaped craft being seen too. How many times were things being witnessed and end up being a military craft we just don't know about? Like the stealth bombers, they didn't become pup. They had them for over 20 something years before they were ever made knowledge, at least to my extent. Like they've had all this stealth technology, at least here in the US. So I have a feeling there's a lot more stuff out there that we have no idea about. So drones seem to come about in the last 20 years, but who's to say that they didn't have prototypes back then that they were testing out?
Hmm.
I don't think we ever know exactly what sort of technologies and capabilities the governments really have until it's public knowledge. And at that point, it's probably already at least 20 to 25 years old of technology before they let it out. Anything brand new, they're not going to release publicly. They got to keep that close to vest because that competitive edge on potential enemies or whatever they want to call them.
Yeah, fair enough. Why do you think are we not allowed to know about all this stuff that's going on? Why don't they get on TV and say, "Hey, guys out there, we have a UFO, we have this, we have that." Why so many secrets? Why don't they come up with all this stuff? Tell us what they have.
I think a lot of it has to do with money and weapons and control and power. At the end of the day, I don't think it's about the excuse that people say is we can't handle it. I think society has gotten to the point now where if someone come out and said, "Hey, there's aliens," we're just be like, "Well, I knew that shit." Just get going about my day. Like
Right?
we've been dubbed down about it for so long that it's not going to be a major shock. Now, I'm not saying like older generations because I know there's a lot of older folks that still are against all this stuff because they're super religious, and that has aspect to it there that they don't want to disprove
Yeah.
any sort of religious type aspects to it. But at the same time, it's not really disproving anything. It's more or less just being like, hey, there's these beings that are here. And I'm not even sure if what we're seeing, we call them extraterrestrials, but what if they're not even from what if they were from here originally?
Right.
And people have been, this was the term that just got thrown out in January here, which I've heard it a lot lately. But now that the government mentioned it, they said interdimensionals. Like one of the Congress ladies that was pushing this UAP thing said interdimensional beings, interdimensional crafts. Like that's a very specific word that she threw out to the media during an interview. I was like, if they're talking about higher intelligence, this and that, they everyone thinks like UFOs, you automatically think aliens, different planets. She specifically said interdimensional beings. That is a very, very specific term to throw to the media. So are they trying to throw people off, or they give them that little bit of seed to let that sink in for a while?
right? Let me give you my 2 cents when it comes to the question, why don't they tell us? If these phenomena are some strange entities that look bizarre, then they might as well appear in their pure form rather than insectoids or reptilians, talking about the theory of distortion that we talked about a few minutes ago. But what if the mask falls and what we see is so disturbing that we might go mad when we see it? It sounds a little bit HP Lovecraftish, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just an idea because it makes us go crazy because we cannot understand and process it. Imagine you realize that these phenomena are disturbingly closely linked to yourself, for example. You're Let's say you're almost interconnected with the phenomena, you yourself, all of us. And perhaps that is also the reason why the general public is not allowed to find out about it, because perhaps we don't know how to teach people how absolutely bizarre the connection between us as humanity and these phenomena is.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea. I mean, let's not say I like it. I find it very interesting because I never understood these fucking top secret shit that they tell us and we couldn't stand it, this and that and yada yada. Why don't they tell us if it's only a if it's only nuts and bolts, if it's only a UFO and a few beings, then they could tell us they come from planet, I don't know, yada yada, and it's just a vehicle and some bodies. Then they could tell us. Why not? Could tell us they're here. We have this and we have that. But what if it's so bizarre that we would go crazy if we knew about it? Um, yeah, I don't know, man. Imagine imagine you the mask falls and you're in some kind of abduction scenario, and the mask falls and you're faced with yourself or with yourself from the future or something like
Yeah.
that. That would be crazy, man. And you find out that you're connected with the phenomena. It's about you. It's
Mm-hmm.
That would be strange, man.
I think a lot of it is, I don't want to say our minds can, you mentioned H.P. Lovecraft, and this is my Cthulhu tattoo.
Awesome. Yeah, I love HP Lovecraft, man.
When you mentioned seeing it and going mad, I was like, that's very Cthulhu-ish, but I have him on my arm. But no, when it comes to stuff like that, I never thought of it in that aspect, but it could be a possibility because we can't comprehend everything. And even if we go back to a different reality, like a different dimension, a different existence, a higher frequency, different levels or whatever, I've been hearing a lot from people lately that a lot of the things that they're encountering are beings from a higher frequency dimension. So basically, they vibrate at a different frequency than what we do.
Mm.
So we can't really see them because they're not within our frequencies. I don't know how any of that works. I'm not a scientist, but it sounds plausible. And what if these beings have the ability to slow down their vibrations to where they come here, and then they claim a lot of the evilness of the world, we'll say. I don't want to say demonics, but they all vibrate at a lower frequency.
Yeah.
We're a lower frequency. The negativity and the hatred and everything else are negativity. So I actually interviewed someone recently and they used the terminology for like hell. Hell isn't so much what we're thinking about. It's just like the lower dark, low vibration area. So you have these beings that people call evil and demonics or whatever, but they're actually these beings from a lower frequency realm. And we can only see in certain lighting aspects. So you have your different, like if you use one of those full spectrum cameras, you can see things normally that you wouldn't see with your naked eye that gets picked up on these spectrum cameras. So they said, what if these creatures, what if these beings, these spirits, or whatever you want to call them, what if they're always around us anyways? We just never see them because they're not within our frequencies. They're not within our vision. They're not. But we're always surrounded by these, and they explain that for cryptids, they explain it for ghosts, they explain it for these alien. Like, what if all these things are all from different stuff that we just can't see with our naked eye, and for some reason we're just now picking them up because we're becoming more open to the idea? Like, someone used the term a great awakening, and I don't know if that's the correct term, but like our brains are starting to awaken more to the strangeness around us. So maybe that's why there's more going on. And I don't know if they don't want us to know about this type of stuff because does that disrupt the power they have over us? If we're able to tap into a higher frequency, a higher level of our own brain to, and this is like a lot of people say this is spirituality, but like if we're able to evolve our own brains into a higher usage, people say that's how they astral project. Like your consciousness, your soul, whatever you want to call it, if you're able to transverse through these different planes, what does that do for the machine here of us having to go to work every day to churn out stuff and everything? Like if people, that's why I go back to the whole control aspect of it. I feel like we are slaves of the machine, and the machine is anyone out there that's controlling the narratives. They don't want us to have that higher knowledge. So they want to keep us in the dark because if these beings are here, what if they are just us that have achieved that from earlier times? They've evolved to the higher light beings that they are. It's a weird concept, but kind of at this point, it's all just throwing shit at walls to see what sticks.
It's it's not weird. It's great. I actually love the idea. And since we don't know what these phenomena are and what they're about, every idea is good. So we
Hmm.
don't know what it is. Um, we try to explain everything with physics sometimes, or a scientist try to explain it with physics, but that's bullshit because these phenomena don't give a shit about physics.
No,
Look at these UAPs or UFOs, how they move. They don't give a shit about physics. They
no.
they uh, come flying with a crazy speed, dive into the water, move underwater with the same speed or even faster, which shouldn't be possible according to physics, right? So they don't give a shit about physics. Um, you talked about vibration and strange beings, maybe from hell or whatever people think it is. Are you aware of the story? There was this guy he told a story about his father who was deployed to Vietnam back then to the war, and they were introduced to these uh, infrared glasses.
Mm-hmm. I've heard this.
You heard about this story, right? And back then they were red instead of green.
Yep.
So and when they tried out these glasses, they've seen these strange beings like gargoyle-like beings with wings and shit and sitting in the trees, waiting in the trees, lurking everywhere and actually attacking the chopper. And this guy, this gunner, shot at them. And some guy came up and said, "You crazy? What you shooting at?" He said, "Those monsters." And yeah, take the glasses, and he put on the glasses. The other guy put on the glasses and also saw these beings. And many people, I mean, could be a urban legend too, but who knows, man?
No, I actually just heard this recently, and from what the other version that I heard, like the how it played out is they sent the glasses back because they had to get new ones. That's why they're green, basically, because the red ones were picking up different beings that are always around us that they aren't used to seeing.
Mhm.
They're picking up those, again, the different vibrations, the different frequency, whatever you want to call them. They're on that different spectrum to where we can't see them. But when they started to see them, the people were freaking out and shooting at them because they thought these monsters were trying to get them. My only concern when it's like stuff like that is if these things are always around, does that mean there's some sitting down here with me right now listening? I wouldn't, that's where it starts to get strange at because if these things are always around, we just can't see them with the naked eye. Where's the line at? Where does it get cut off? Like if I'm outside walking and I walk right past one, but I didn't see it, But if I had those glasses on, I would have seen it. It's almost like that old Roddy Piper movie, like They Live. You put on the glasses, you can see what the people are really underneath the fake skins. Well, if this brings to light these creatures or beings or spirits or whatever you want to call them that are around us at all the time, that's a strange concept to think about. But they don't interact with us really. But every once in a while, if you want to throw out like a cryptid, people see them every once in a while, but then they just disappear.
Hmm.
People have paranormal experiences. They say they're encountering ghosts or they see a shadow person. What if that's just one of these same things that we're experiencing? They're just on a different plane that they just somehow bleed into ours and they enter like the cross paths. Are we not able to cross paths with them? Like sometimes we walk into their reality. Like I don't know how any of that works. It's like it's questions I always have. Like when I have interviews with people and they talk about this type of stuff, it brings more questions to me. It's I started a podcast to find answers, and I've had more questions than I've ever had answers.
Right? Same here. So here's a few more thoughts on the Vietnam story, for example, and about the question if these beings are always around. Why are you ask question, are they here right now with us? Maybe. I don't know. We don't know. But why, if the story was true, why did these guys in Vietnam back then saw so many of these things in Vietnam?
Hmm.
I think it's because of the energy. I think these things, these beings could have been energy vampires. Let's call it energy vampires, or maybe astral parasites, stuff like that,
Feeding on the negativity.
feeding on the negativity. And where was more negativity at
Yeah.
that time than in Vietnam back then? There were so much hate and bad vibes. So it was a feast for them, right? And the questions, are they sitting here right now? Maybe waiting for you to bump your toe on the, you know, or on the bed and you get angry. I don't know, man, but could be possible. But I think it's concentrated on different on certain spots. Why are there places in the world where these things occur more frequently? Places like the Skinwalker Ranch, for example. And not only there, of course, there are many more places where UFOs or phenomena are regularly observed. So what is it about these places? Why there?
I think it all has to do with the actual energy. I don't want to say vortexes because those get thrown out there a lot, but I
Portals.
think I think it's a lot to do with like the areas themselves, what the type of earthly energies that they give off in these areas. I'm assuming like someplace like Skinwalker Ranch, they have a lot of earth energies that come out. Same thing when you look into like these national parks that we have here in the States. People say vortexes, they say portals, whatever. There's a lot of high energy in these areas. And is that because that's where these things are feeding from? They want that energy, they're drawn to it. So people have more experiences there. You can put down a map and you can put down a missing persons map. And then you can put down a weird cryptid sighting map and like lay them on top of each other. And usually the high influx is all within national park areas, which I get people go hiking. So that's the explanation of why they get lost, they disappear. But then people see a lot of weird shit in these areas too. And then if you lay that over with like cave systems, inner earth, basically like where these cave systems are, there's a lot of weird sightings too, and a lot of people disappear in these weird sighting areas. There's a lot of UFOs in these. Like you can just lay these maps like of sight, like they build up, and there's always a high concentration of areas, and they're all within areas that have a lot of Earth energy. And when I said inner Earth, like I'm not saying like hollow Earth or anything like that, but like if there's a cave system, it leads into the Earth, and if there's high energies from the earth, maybe they just come out more in these cave system areas. Like that's I don't know how that works, but like there's a lot of strange activities and a lot of strange sightings and a lot of strange disappearances in these high concentration areas, and usually they're around cave systems.
Well, that's an interesting thought. The question is there a strange energy or force creates these phenomena, and why does this force belong to Earth, to our planet? Was it brought here? Have we always been here? Was we brought here by who knows, man? Was there civilizations before us? How many? How often? It's it's some crazy questions, man. Think about the pyramids, for example.
Hmm.
I think the old Egyptians, they just found them. They have been there long before. This is my theory. This is the idea that I like. It's not my theory, of course, but it's the idea that I like. They have been here before and maybe had for a strange reason. I don't know, man, because all that stuff has to do with star constellations and stuff like that. There's so much more to it, man. It's crazy.
Not to go down the whole rabbit hole for flat Earth, but when you talk about the pyramids and the star constellations and everything else, and how many years it's taken the pyramids to be built, and how we're on a spinning ball in a universe that's constantly shifting and everything still lines up the same. I've always wondered how that's possible if we're all if the universe is expanding and moving. The pyramids they line up. I forget what the star system is, but they line up with that. And there's other spots throughout these areas that all line up too. They're all built from like constellations. Well, if these things were built thousands of years ago, at what point wouldn't we have shifted just a little bit? I don't, like I said, I don't, that's the science term of it, and it's the physics term and whatever. I'm not a scientist or whatever, so someone can prove me wrong if they want to, whatever. But I've always wondered that. And I'm not saying that we live on a flat earth by any means or anything like that. But when you go down that rabbit hole and you start to question things, it's again, I was a skeptic. So back years ago, people said flat earth, I'd laugh at them like, these people are stupid. Now I'm like, I started looking into it, it's like, I actually kind of understand why people are questioning things because some of this stuff doesn't make sense. And there's a lot of different things out there that I used to write off as people were dumb. And how could anyone believe something that stupid? Now I'm like, yep, they're probably right. Like, it just, there's a lot of things out there that we don't know. And I don't understand how to make people see that for what it is basically we don't know jack shit at this point. Like, we think we do, but we're only told and we know what we're told. And what we're being told, I don't think is 100% true. I think we're only being told what they think we need to know.
Hmm. I was the same. I I hated stuff talking about stuff like inner Earth, flat Earth, and the idea of reptilians. There was the three things. I don't know. That was too much for me. But I changed my mind a little bit. I don't think the Earth is flat. I do not think the Earth is flat at all. And I do believe we've been to space, and I do believe we've been to the moon, but I don't know when. I don't know if the story is true, but I think we've been there. But I don't know about. I'm not sure about the moon landing. But
I don't believe in the moon landing at all.
well, oh, not at all.
I don't, I'm not saying we haven't been there, but I don't think the one in the 60s, I don't think we actually went and walked on the moon. None of that adds up. And then conveniently, 3 years after we landed on the moon, they destroyed all the technology. They've never been able to replicate it to go back to the moon. I was like, well, that's awful convenient.
And it wasn't. Uh, According to the scientists back then, it wasn't a very complicated technology. So we've basically traveled on Game Boy technology
You
to
know,
so yeah, it's it's strange. Yeah, it was strange. You're absolutely right. Some some of these things they just don't match up. But
the one thing that I've always laughed at is the phone call from the moon.
yeah,
How did the president make a phone call to the astronauts on the moon? Like, and you could see them on video. So it was like they were FaceTiming each other. It just, even as a kid, that's like back in the 90s or whatever, I'm a kid, like we didn't have technology like that where you could video someone. Now we do, like FaceTime on your cell phone. But this was back in 1969. How did they get that signal in real time to shoot from the moon all the way to live TV to see the president talking to, was it Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, one of the two? None of that made any. If you go back as an adult looking back, I was like, how did that happen? Like, it doesn't really make sense. And then how did they had to have a rocket to leave Earth just to get past the gravity and everything. They managed to get to the moon, and then they didn't need a rocket to leave the moon, but they managed to get off the moon and then dock back into the shuttle and get back in here in this little capsule thing and make it back to Earth. Like, they only had one shot, and good thing they didn't miss. Everything went perfect without a hitch. Like, it's too, I don't know, it's too perfect for their first attempt.
Right. It's too perfect for something that you've never done before, and especially in fucking space.
You
So,
know,
yeah, you're right. And there's so many conspiracies about the moon, anyways, like the hollow moon, the dark side of the moon, and the moon as a alien base, of course. Of course,
yeah.
the moon as a generation ship, and that brings me to reptilians. I I wasn't into the idea of reptilians. I hated the idea of reptilians. I thought it was everything was science fiction. And I still have a problem with the reptilian idea. But then I heard the story about the Zulu warriors from Africa. Do you know the folklore from the tribe of the Zulu?
I'm not familiar with it.
They say that the moon wasn't always here. The moon was brought here. The moon was brought here by the so-called water brothers. Those were reptilian beings coming from space, traveled in the fucking moon, which they stole from a big dragon in space, and they came here. The Zulu observed the moon as a very, very small uh, ball of light, getting bigger and bigger and bigger over the years until it was what it is now. So the Zulu say that the moon wasn't always here, was brought here by reptilian beings. That's Zulu folklore. Isn't that crazy?
I've actually heard, and I don't know where this was or how long ago it was, but they claim if you look back at like paintings, like ancient paintings and like even like up to like medieval time paintings or whatever, you never saw a moon ever being painted. You'd see the sun, but they never had depictions of the moon. And I don't know if that's true or not. I just remember I either heard it on a TV show, I've read it or something. I have no idea. But I do remember hearing something about how the moon didn't used to be here. And they claim ancient people's depictions of what they would paint. Like you would see things like back, like if you go through any area of the world and they find cave paintings from ancient humanoids or whatever, they would paint what they would see. So you'd see pictures of deer, you'd see pictures of people. Like some of these pictures look like men with suits on. Like you've seen that shit on Ancient Aliens, like people intermingling with like what they claim were aliens. They've seen pictures of big, tall, hairy men looking things. They claim that was Bigfoot. You see pictures of the sun, but you never saw any depictions of what they would see every single night out there. Like the moon would always, if you have a full moon, then it goes half moon to no moon. Like, why was that never brought up on any of these paintings before? And even like artists, when they're painting their paintings, like actual, like real paintings that people hang up for artwork, you didn't see a whole lot of moon in any of those either.
Strange, right? Why do so many people laugh about all these ancient reports, like the ones from the Zulu? There's the tribe of the Dogon, also an African tribe, and they tell the story of amphibian-like beings, half humanoid, half amphibian beings coming from the sky teaching them shit, and then they went back to space.
It's,
So, what do you make of these stories? You hear them from ancient tribes.
you hear them from like
Yeah,
the Sumerians. They
right.
had the Anunnaki, and a lot of people, for some reason, they've bastardized it with religious aspects to it. And a lot of the same stories, though, if you look back, don't look at the religious aspect to it. Don't look at any of the different names that they call these things. But if you look at it in the sense of what are all these stories saying? Something that we considered a higher power being came down here and helped us and gave us the knowledge and either bred us, made us, whatever. It's all the same story all over the whole world. Everyone has their own various versions of it, but it's always the same concept. Something came here and made us. Something came here and started our civilizations. Where'd they come from? That's the thing that no one seems to ever want to agree on is like, oh, God made us. These people say the Anunnaki made us. These other people say, oh, these beings came down, they made it. Like, everyone's got their own religious aspects to it. Everyone's got their own creationist story to it. But basically, the story is something came here and made us. Something came down here. Even if you want to throw in the biblical aspects, God made Adam and Eve out of nothing. I know on my show, there's a lot of people that are Christians that listen to what I do. I'm not a Christian in the sense of being a Christian. So
Neither
it's not
I.
my, like, I'm not dogging on anyone that is, but that is just not, I'm not a religious person. And when you start to see things more clearly in the sense of you look at all the other ways of things of how civilizations were started, all these different civilizations had a flood story.
Hmm.
A lot of these different civilizations, like all over the world, you can hear it, and it's all the same type of thing, but it all starts with something came and created us. So what was it? And that's where I go back to is like they say these are gods. Well, to us, they would have been a god because they're more advanced. They came from the skies, they came from the heavens, they came from wherever the hell they came from, and they projected life onto us. They gave us the knowledge. They built the stuff. They taught us these things. We're stopped being running out in the woods, I guess, and whatever we did is evolutionary lines. Because even if you look at evolution, if you believe in the theory that we came from evolution, it's still strange to think that something happened to us to become what we are today. And you look at every other animal out there, they've never evolved to what we did. So, how does that work? How do we get so intelligent that we're here having a conversation now across the world, but other animals never had that capability? Like,
Right,
what made us special?
right. Why do so many people trust and believe in religion and in the story that God made you from, I don't know, fucking clay or whatever, or from Adam's
It's
ribs and all these kind of stories? Why do so many people believe in these stories?
because that's just what's forced on them at such an early age. It's the indoctrination of it. Same thing with when people go to school and we're taught 1 + 1 = 2
Yeah,
because that's what we're taught.
but at some point you can decide for yourself, right? If you trust in these stories. I think it is also because it's comfortable
Hmm.
and it's easy. You can say, okay, God made me from, I don't know, whatever, and we we was there. End of the story. I can go on with my day. I can read my newspaper. I can smoke my cigarette. I can go to the bar, have a beer. Don't have to break my head about it. But if you and you and I, we're a little bit alike. We think about the deep shit. We like to go down rabbit holes. We think about stuff like the stuff we talked about a few minutes ago. Like, have we been brought here by some maybe alien beings or some strange entities, and why? Yeah, and that's uncomfortable for many people. They don't have to think. They have to think outside the box if they deal with this kind of shit. Why have we been brought here? Who brought us here? And what's the purpose? Are we do we even belong to Earth? Or what is it? Some people say it's a prison planet. It's also a theory. Um, I don't know, man. It's and at at what point did humans stop going after the idea that we've been brought here by someone, by someone else, or
I
that
don't
someone
know
else
if
made us, but God. When do because we have these ancient reports, we have they're here. People actually believed it back then. They believed it, but when did we stop believing and believed in let's say the Bible and the religious thing with God that created us from this and from that? When did we stop? At what point? At what point did people stop thinking about these ancient reports?
I think a lot of it had to do when, as I know it's gonna sound fucked up, but like you had your crusades supposedly. I wasn't there, but if you didn't believe in that, you're being murdered. Like they went around, they tried to wipe out people. Like all these wars and everything that goes on is all based off some sort of religious aspect to an extent. And this, I know you don't want to dive into the reptilians, but like they were the ones that always seem to be thrown into these whole negative feeding beings. So what would be the best way to keep the world feeding you by having them hate each other? And I'm not saying they're reptilians, but like if there is such a thing as low frequency feeding on hate beings, like we talked about with the Vietnam stuff, what would be the best way to keep everyone in check? You give them these false beliefs. You don't allow them to know anything. You can't think outside the box. They're pre programmed. They're indoctrinated to believe in the type of bullshit that you want them to. And then you program them to hate each other. So you have all your different religions, your different races, your different things, and you make it to where everyone cannot get along on your political skill, on your biblical skills, on your religion, like whatever you want to do. Someone's always got something different to say and they can't like each other. So that breeds that negativity. It breeds the hatred. It breeds what they need to sustain their own abilities. So when people say this is a prison, I've heard that several different times. And it's basically, we're just the cattle and they're farming us and they're not here eating us, but they're eating what we produce. And we produce that low vibrations, that low negativity that they need to sustain their life. So if they're here in the moon or if they're down in Antarctica, like some people claim they are, whatever these things are, again, reptilians, even in the biblical aspect, I can throw this back to reptilian looking things like what influenced Eve? Oh, was a snake. And then the punishment was he took the legs and arms off and made it crawl on its belly. So if that's the truth, that used to walk on two legs like a human,
Yeah, heard that too.
so that's almost reptilian in an aspect. I'm not saying the Bible is true. I'm not saying any religious text is true, but I think there are parts in there that were influenced from something that could have been possibly true. That makes sense. Like you had your flood stories. Everybody has the flood story. The whole thing with the talking snake. Well, that would be a reptile on two legs influencing the misbehaving. All right, there's your first clue of we were influenced to be this way. The reptile influenced to go down this dark path. And then when you see your depictions of hell and everything else, there's these low, they're always like the depiction is like fire and brimstone, like your low frequencies or whatever. They're so cold and this and that. Like that doesn't add up. I asked someone this the other day on my podcast of they were talking about, they said, have you ever touched something so cold that it burnt? And it's like, I never thought about that. We think like the lake of fire where it burns this and that. Like, what if it's because it's so cold? You touch it and you get burnt from the coldness of it. I was
Yeah.
like, huh, that's a that's a different idea to take into account too.
Yeah.
But no,
Awesome.
like I've never would have thought of the stuff like this up until the last few years or whatever. But I'm on board with thinking that you know what, it makes just as much sense to say that's true as it is any type of religion because at the end of the day, again, we still don't really know. But am I supposed to believe that there's some great creator out there making all these things up? And like you mentioned, he took clay and made humans and then made a rib and made a woman out of it. And then they had two kids and the kid killed the other kid, but then we kept breeding. And how the fuck did that happen? Like,
Yeah. If you if you get rid of the religious aspect in the Bible, you have a whole different book. You can read it with a whole different mindset. It's an ancient alien book. Could be a Eric von Daniken book
Yeah.
if you get rid of the religious aspect. Yeah, that's very interesting. What do you think about the idea of this all this being a matrix or some kind of simulation?
It almost feels that way. If you go back into where I mentioned the alternate realities, different levels of existence, the key word to me is levels.
Hmm.
And I throw out the whole Mario term. Back in the old days, like you'd go to this level, you're on level one, and then you had to go down and you go to level two. And mathematics, supposedly, you can mathematically prove there's different dimensions. And I remember the Ninja Turtles always had Dimension X. So I was like, well, at least there's 10 because in Dimension X, that's where Shredder and Krang and all those crazy foot soldiers were in the old cartoons for Ninja Turtles. So I don't know what the scientific count is, but supposedly there is a theory for different dimensions. If you look at dimensions as different levels and you just stack them, we're on the third dimension. We're in the 3D realm. So there's the fourth dimension. What if there's a fifth one? So what if some of these creatures that are above us are intermingled? They're from the fourth and they come down here. Someone says time is the fourth dimension, and I don't know how you consider time. But what if there's these different planes of existence and somehow our bodies, when we die, and people say it's our souls and our consciousness or whatever, if we're stuck here, what if we're only here because this is where our bodies are at? And then when we move on to that different dimension. Like we go to that higher reality. And again, what if the things that people are saying are interdimensional beings that are here to program us or do this to us and that to us? What if it's people that were already here and they've moved on to the other higher levels? So what if the things that we're talking to, like that we think are spirits, and people, oh, they're ghosts of our dead relatives? Maybe that is true in the sense that maybe that's their consciousnesses have moved on to these other realities. Like we've transgressed from our prison system here, our 3D realm, our world that we're stuck to, and then we move on up to the other levels.
Great thoughts. I think about the two a lot. I'd love to discuss the topic of consciousness, anyways, because it's very interesting to share thoughts on what is consciousness, anyways. Where is it located? Is it within you? Is it in your blood cells? Is it in your brain? Is it in your heart? Or is it somewhere else? I think it's somewhere else. I don't think it's inside me somewhere. I believe in the collective consciousness. I believe that everything is, yeah, outsourced, so to speak.
I
It's not in my head or in my heart or in my blood. What do you think?
don't know how to describe it, but like I recently was told, and I've read a little bit, people don't have inner monologues. Some people don't have like an inner monologue where they can think, like they hear themselves thinking. I do that all the time. Like I think to myself and I hear myself thinking. How could someone not have that? And does that mean I've never heard it described this way? I've never said this before, but if they can't hear themselves think, they don't have that inner monologue, they don't have a consciousness, does that mean they're soulless? Is that how that works? Like, I don't know. But like, is it something within you or is it in your brain and it's all just brain capacity? Literally, are we just a brain in a meat suit? Like,
I
no,
do.
I understand there's so many questions about, I've thought about this too, is like, what is the soul? Like, where does it come from? Where does it go? What makes us unique? Are we all just literally electrical impulses being rocket shot out from our brainstem? You know what I mean? None of that makes any sense when you look at it in that grand scheme of things. So the concept of being in a simulation, I've said this before and I reference it back to like video games. I think the problem with people ever accepting the fact that we're in a simulation is they don't want to accept that they're just an NPC. They're a non-playable character. We're just here. We're not the main star of the show.
I think I think you experienced, just like every one of us, the feeling when you're sometimes doing something and you stop, and you, here in Germany we say, staring a hole into the air. You just stare and you get lost for a minute. It feels like a second, but sometimes it can be a minute or two. You just you're just looking, and but your head is somewhere else. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't know if you have a term for it, but like I said, this is how we call it in Germany. And where are you when that happens? I I can't remember where I was with my thoughts
You know,
for
you
this.
get lost. You get lost in your own thoughts. I do that a lot. If I'm doing something mundane, like if I'm working, I'm thinking in my head.
But what do
I'll
you
complete.
think? Do you remember what you thought of? I sometimes it's like it's like missing time sometimes to me. It's
Mm-hmm.
I wake up again and I'm going, man, what where was I? What was I thinking? What happened? So it's
One of the things that happens to me a lot, which makes me go back to the alternate realities or simulations or different pathways, is I have deja vu quite a bit.
oh yeah.
And every time I have it, it's like a gut punch. Like as soon as I realize, like, I've seen this before, I've done this before, I knew what, like, I get queasiness. It's just like, ugh. Like, why do I know this? Why have I experienced this already? It happens often for me. And I don't know how to describe it. People are just like another conspiracy, like the whole Mandela effect thing, remembering stuff that's not true. Like, why are people having deja vu? Why are people remembering things that are not correct? Like, what has changed? And why do we know things? So, if you start to look at this, it's almost like, again, somewhere along the line, something has changed. I don't know what the scientific term is. I know, like, you have your comic books and superhero movies throughout multiverses or whatever else terms or whatever, but
Yeah, yeah. Multiverse timelines, call it whatever you
mm,
want. I know exactly what you mean. I find it very, very interesting. Interesting that you talk about it. It happened. I had deja vus myself a lot when I was young. When I was a teen, I would say I had a lot of deja vus, and it made me go crazy, man. Almost every other day, I had a strange deja vu, and I thought, man, I the door rang. My grandmother went to the door and answered the door and talked to someone, and I already knew what they
I'm gonna say,
were going to say.
you know,
So maybe it's because we're in a strange way are interconnected to different multiverses or different realms. I don't know. Name you name it. Give it a name. I think
I,
yeah, we're interconnected.
I feel like that is a, for people like you and me who've had these strange experiences and we do shows like this, I've talked with other people. I feel like there is a common trait between people like us who have these experiences that a lot of us do have deja vu.
Mm.
I wonder if that just means we're the reason we have experiences because we're more open to things. That's why we can see things a little bit different. That's why we're open to talking about certain things like this. Maybe that's why we are able to have this crazy shit that happened to us because our bodies, our minds are more open to that. Maybe the deja vu we're experiencing that is because somehow we're connected to that opening to other people aren't. Does that make it like you and I had deja vu? Well, you've seen UFOs. I've seen some weird freaking dog thing, but we both do a podcast. And we both talk about very similar things. What made us on that projected trajectory to get to where we're at today to have this conversation? Something along the lines that had to connect all of this together.
Mm.
So maybe again, our consciousness, our minds, or the multiverse, whatever you want to call everything, maybe it connects us all together because we have that opening and connection to that other side that we haven't tapped in yet. Maybe our brains are just, I don't want to throw that. more evolved stage out there, but people say we're at that higher transgressions of evolving from where we're at here in our 3D realm.
Yeah. And on the other hand, there are people that never experience anything in a lifetime.
Hmm.
Nothing at all. They don't believe it. They don't experience nothing. I had a neighbor, a young guy, and I told him about the podcast and all that stuff, and he was always joking about it. And I said, "Do you ever observe the sky at night? Sit in your garden with a beer and a smoke and look at the sky and observe it and think about how beautiful it is and what else is up there?" He said, "I never look into the sky." And that made me go crazy. I said, What the fuck? How can you how can you look in the sky, in the night sky, no clouds and stuff, and not be interested in it?" I didn't get it. Strange
Yeah,
people.
I've always looked out into space and I always wonder like what else is there. And then lately I've been looking out into the stars and like, man, how are they claiming these are trillions of miles away and what we're seeing is from something from the past and they couldn't even be there anymore? It's taking so long for light to even reach here. I started going in
Yeah.
that aspect. I was like, now I can't even look out into space and enjoy it anymore because now my brain's wrapped around all these weird things where it doesn't add up. I was like, so you're telling me we're looking into the past? I don't know.
It's weird, right?
No.
Have you ever experienced sleep paralysis when you were younger? Because it always, not always, it often happens to uh, people in their teens or when they're pretty young.
There's a couple different things that I can talk about that has some sort of sleep paralysis aspect to it. And I've got about 40 minutes before I got to go pick up my kid. So I'll try and rush through some of the weird shit that's going on. But when this was probably about 20 years ago, I remember I lived with my parents and I woke up feeling like I couldn't move. And I felt like I was being strangled. My throat was burning. When I opened my eyes, and everyone's laughed at me about this, I saw a cowboy, or what I thought was a cowboy. I seen a silhouette of a shadowy man with a hat on, looked like I said a cowboy hat over me, and he was choking me, and I literally could not move, and I couldn't breathe. I was gasping, my throat was burning, and I finally broke free. It was gone. I went up and got a drink of water. My throat just really, really hurt. I wrote it off as basically, well, I was having a dream. My throat was sore. I must have been, I got a sore throat from, I don't know, but I got a drink. I felt better. I went back to sleep. Here in the last few years, I've heard of things called Hat Man. Never heard of that before up until I started doing the podcast, to be honest. Those are associated with sleep paralysis. I don't know about the choking aspect, but a lot of people that see Hat Man always have like a sleep paralysis aspect to it for the most part. So did I experience that 20 something years ago? I don't know. Like I literally saw what I told everyone was a cowboy choking me and everyone gets a good laugh about it. But they go, you were dreaming. Maybe I was. But now I'm like, was I really dreaming? So, and then that was like my first real, that I can remember aspect of something strange. Now we bought this house that I live in now back in 2020. And when we first moved in, and I don't want to say anything in here that I'm about to tell you is paranormal, because again, I'm the first person that tries to write everything off as not. This house was built in 1978, so I'm 40 years old, so the house is 6 years older than I am. I've lived in this area for basically my whole life. My parents lived like 3 or 4 miles away, not too far. I still live in the same area, but we moved into this house and I was painting the kitchen. This was before we actually moved everything else, trying to get everything painted before we brought all the furniture and everything in. But I have my dogs in here, and my dog is growling in the living room at something. That dog would growl at anything. It didn't matter if a leaf blew, he'd be growling at it. So I told him to knock it off, and he kept growling. And then I heard the floorboard creak, which if you walk through there now, it'll still make a creaking noise. So I peeked my head around the corner, and he's growling at nothing, but I heard that noise. So I'm like, Well, that's weird. My hair kind of raised up on my arm a little bit, giving a little bit of goosebumps. I was like, well, that's creepy, but I told him to knock it off, and I went back to painting and think anything of it. And then it was probably like maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks later. It was our first weekend. We'd moved in. The bigger kids, they went to their dads. Like, the two older ones are my stepkids. And my wife and I are in bed. We just put our daughter down, and she was probably about 20 months old at the time. We have a baby monitor with a camera, and so we can hear her if she wakes up in the middle of the night 'cause she's in her own room. And the house has the old pull down blinds. We actually still have them up, but like they roll up. You pull them down, you got to tug on it, and it stays down. If you pull them again, they roll back up.
Mhm.
We're laying in bed, and our blind from the window just shoots up by itself, scares the shit out of us. But we start laughing it off because obviously we didn't pull it tight enough. No big deal. Pulled the blind back down, laid back in bed. 5 minutes later, through the baby monitor, we hear mine. Man voice saying mine. Like,
Whoa.
we instantly go get our daughter out of the bedroom and bring her into our room. I was like, I ain't fucking around with this. And for basically the next 7 or 8 months, she slept in our bed or in our bedroom with us. But that was because 2 or 3 days later, my wife is changing our daughter's clothes, like change your diaper, change your clothes, and down our daughter's back, there were three very big scratch marks. There was no way that she could have done that herself. I took the other kid's hands and I put them up next to it. The only hand big enough that could have made the marks, like for the gaps, was my hand. I know for 100% fact I did not scratch my baby. I, I freaked out. I went through the house. I went through every corner of the house. I cussed the thing out. I did my best to banish it. I called all sorts of choice names, said it's not welcome here. Everything negative, evil, whatever it is, trying to screw around with an infant, like a toddler, needs to leave. It is not here. This is my place. You're not welcome. And I thought we were done with all that because we never had any more problems. So I thought. About a years go by, and my daughter starts talking to this imaginary friend, which that creeps me out in the first place.
Hmm.
When kids have imaginary friends, I'm not very fond of that. But anyways, she starts talking about this Chloe. Very specific name too. Well, she has a friend named Chloe. I told my wife, I don't like that. Creeps me out. She said, it's nothing. And she referenced that cartoon show Bluey, whatever. Bluey's best friend is Chloe. So that's where she's getting it from because our daughter really liked Bluey at the time. I thought, oh, okay, whatever. Well, she started talking more and more about it. And it got to the point where she said that Chloe lived under her bed, or Chloe lived under the floor. Well, that's weird. So for some reason, I decided I was going to ask her one day, what does Chloe look like? And I don't remember exactly if she said blue or purple, but she gave me a color. I'm pretty sure she said purple. I said, oh, okay, well, Bluey's blue, Chloe's purple, whatever, makes sense. I said, oh, why is she purple? I could have just left it alone, but me being me, I can't leave anything well enough alone. She said, because she's dead. I was like, what? She's like, she's a ghost. I was like, no more Chloe. Chloe's not. My daughter's 3. She shouldn't know what ghost or dead or anything. You know what I mean? That shouldn't be something that she knows about. So I said, Chloe's not welcome. You're not allowed to talk to Chloe anymore. Chloe's got to be gone. No more Chloe. Thought everything was fine. I started doing this podcast. About a month or two gets into the podcast, someone reaches out to me in a comment on Facebook. It says, I really worry about you and your family. I don't know who this person is, just a random person. And I was like, okay, why? They said, because when you start looking into things, sometimes things start looking back. Well, that's very niche, like Nietzsche or whatever that old saying is. Like when you stare into the abyss, sometimes the abyss stares back. So I didn't think anything of it. I was like, well, whatever. About that time, though, my daughter started having night terrors. She wouldn't sleep in her bedroom. She kept waking up in the night having bad dreams. Would never say what the dreams were, but she just said having bad dreams. She'd always come crawl in bed with us. Now, my wife and I had a son back in June of 2021, so he's about to turn 3. So he was only about a year old, and he's always slept in his own room, never had any problems with him. Up until last fall. Well, right before all this started, my kids, the older ones, decided they were going to have some friends over, and they were going to try and make a makeshift Ouija board. Of all things to do in this house, why would you do that? But they're preteens, and that was their friend's idea. They came up and got some candles. We assumed that they just wanted to light candles to make the room smell. We didn't know. And then I asked my wife, I was like, 'cause I heard them start screaming down here. I was like, what did they take downstairs? And she told me a lighter and candles. Like, I bet they're trying to have a fucking seance. So I come running down here. Sure enough, they took paper, they tried and drew like answers to it, and they had a pen set up, and they were trying to communicate with spirits. Well, I blew up on them. I don't give a shit. One of the kids have never been back to my house. I'm sure they went home and told them that the crazy dad over there screamed at them about demons and how all sorts of stuff. So they've never came back to the house. I was like, I don't give a shit at this point. Like, don't come in my house and start trying to talk to things that you don't know what you're doing. I was like, none of you guys know the doorways that you can be open. You don't know what you're going to bring over here. I was like, some of that shit will follow you for the rest of your life if you don't know how to close it. I was like, that is not something you kids need to be screwing around with. And I was like, you two especially, to my kids, I was like, you know the stuff that I deal with. You know the stuff that we have to deal with in this house. You should know better. So I hope that got through to them. But again, one of their friends has been back a few times, but that one kid, she's never been back since. It's like, well, I don't care. Maybe she learned a life lesson not to come to my house and try and talk to demons.
Maybe.
But that is about the time frame where weird shit started happening again. This was back in, like I said, just 6 months ago, 7 months ago. And it turned really, really strange. Now my 2-year-old son is not wanting to sleep in his bed. He started having the same issues. He wants to come sleep with us, and he barely talks. Now, in October, no, it was November, it was right around November, and I don't know if this is connected or all, but it is one of the strange things that happened. Out back in our field, out behind the field, above the tree line, there was a orange glowing orb. It almost looked like a flare. It was just stationary, and I yelled for my wife and son to come take a look at it. And I've made comments before, like, how do people say all these things and they never think about recording and take a photo of it? My dumb ass didn't take a photo of it. I didn't record it. I just didn't even think about it. I was just too amazed at watching this big glowing ball of fire out back. It floated up and moved over a little bit, floated up, and then disappeared. A flare wouldn't just float upward, it'd be coming down. This thing moved up and then over and then disappeared. We watched it for like 5 minutes. It wasn't an airplane. It was just a orange glowing ball. It was just like a little orange glowing fireball. And then the beginning of December, my son started saying ghost. He's laying in the bed between my wife and I. He's looking up in the ceiling. Daddy, ghost, ghost. My wife's like, are you hearing him? And I'm laying down, I'm facing the wall. I was like, yep. I'm not looking. I don't want to see what he's looking at. She's like, he's pointing to the ceiling. So I turn over, look, I don't see anything up there. There's like a shadow from the fan or whatever. So I was like, buddy, I don't see anything. He curls up next to her and like, he's like shaking. She's like, do you feel him? He's like, he's terrified. I never knew what he was looking at. I never saw anything. We finally got him calmed down. We ended up falling asleep and he woke up about 4:30 in the morning. He asked me to go get him a drink. So I went up to go get him something to drink and he's like, Daddy, ghost's gone. He barely spoke at this point. Like he's a lot better talking now. This was back in, like I said, December. How would he know what a ghost is at that age? You know what I mean? Like, it's strange. I have a video where this happened a few days after that. He comes running up there and he gets on the couch next to me and he's like, ghost, out, ghost, ghost, out. And you can watch his hand moving and everything. In the video, you can tell he's afraid. Like something from this back area he's pointing to is freaking him out. I went through the house again. I did everything I did the first time. Said it needed to leave. It's not welcome here. He hasn't mentioned the word ghost much anymore. So I hope that kind of helped the matter. But then in January, well, before January, this was right before Christmas, we found a tooth. It looked like a human tooth. It looked like a little kid tooth. I'll send you pictures if you want to see it. I left my wife to see it. She agreed it looked like a little kid's tooth, but it had a root to it. So it's strange that a little tooth like that would have a root. My dog was chewing on it. I checked the dog's mouth. The dog wasn't missing any teeth, so it's not a dog tooth. Well, that was, like I said, I just found the photo the other day on my phone. It was December 18th. Now, right before Christmas, it was that Saturday before Christmas. So I don't know what day the date would have been, but I woke up in the middle of the night and I was having a dream. Something was trying to take my kid. They look like little pink humanoid little figures. They're not gray aliens. They didn't look like the little thing back here. They looked like little humans, but they were really pinkish. And they were pulling on him, like trying to take him away. And I'm punching these motherfuckers. I don't care. I'm kicking them. I'm swinging on them. And one of them comes up with something in its hand, and it sticks it right up in my nostrils, like a glowing little, I said, like an ET finger, where like a glow, like went up right in my nostril. And I woke up. And then next to me, he's not laying in bed with me. I freak out because that's where he was. Somehow he managed to crawl under the covers and made it all the way to the foot of the bed. He's never done that before, and he's never done that since. So that's a very strange event of why he managed to crawl under the covers all the way to the foot of the bed between my wife and I. So I grabbed him, brought him up between us. I held on to him. I went back to sleep. I went to sleep hanging on to him. The next morning, I went up to the bathroom, my normal routine, and washed my hands. I happened to look up in the mirror. Swear to God, whatever deity or whatever, I have crusty blood on the same nostril where that glowing light went up in my nose. I instantly freaked out. I yelled for my wife, showed her. She started laughing and saying basically I was probably picking my nose. I was like, the whole dream aspect of what was going on. Like, I don't believe in coincidences. That's just too fucked up. Well, we had Christmas that day with her family, and she told them, so they're all getting a good laugh out of like, oh, you must have been picking your nose in your sleep. You probed yourself with your finger. Like, have a good laugh. Like, what if it wasn't a dream? And then everyone thinks I'm crazy because what they do.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's strange. Well, then we go to Disney World for New Year's. We come back that first week back. I go out to the garage to get something to drink at night. It's probably like 1 in the morning. I woke up. As I'm coming back in, I see about a 15 to 18-inch little shadow run down my hallway right to my daughter's bedroom, the same bedroom where all the weird shit happens. I gave chase. I ran into her room. She's sound asleep in her bed. Looked around, didn't see a shadow. Like, what in the fuck? So I go back and go to sleep. And then nothing really seemed to go on anymore. And then in February, my dog's chewing on something again. My son grabs her. Like, give me that. She drops another tooth.
Yeah.
I check her mouth. He gives me the tooth. I don't see nothing. I show my wife the tooth and she turns completely pale. It looks identical to the same tooth. And I told her, I said, dog must have found the tooth from like a month or two ago. And she doesn't say nothing. She just like stares at me. I'm like, well, the kids are all in there. I'm like, what? She says, I threw that tooth in the trash. She's like, and it's gone. I was like, clearly not. It's right here. She's like, no, I threw it out. So I took photos of this tooth. I went outside and I went down the road and I chucked it off into an abandoned field. So I know it's gone this time. So if the tooth comes back again, I don't know what else to do. But they look like little kid teeth, but they have a root to them. And I don't know what it would be.
It's
Like
fucking man.
apparently some people say, oh, it's rodents bringing teeth in. Okay, fine. If a mouse is bringing in a tooth, that's cool. But where the hell is it getting the tooth? I
Yeah.
want to know what little kid's head it's taking the teeth from. Like, none of my kids are missing teeth. So, like, it's not from them. So I don't know.
So I know people say that kids are so open minded still that they can see, in fact, can see ghosts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But man, I would freak out. My daughter would say ghost, 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 and talk to an imaginary friend. I would freak out, man.
No.
Fortunately, my daughter never, or none of my kids never had a imaginary friend. And the thing with the nose also very strange. But it's could be possible though that you hurt your nose while you were sleeping,
Mm-hmm.
and the dream came from this. Stuff like that happens. But
No.
it's strange though. The kind of dream you had, man. I don't
I've
know.
never had a dream like that before or again. Like I said, that it's just a sequence. I don't believe in coincidences. It's the sequence of the timing. Like we find a tooth, and then like a couple days later, I have this dream of something taking my kid. Like the nose, like,
Yeah,
and I've been the first person to say, like, when people come on my show and they start telling me they've had an experience with Bigfoot, they've been abducted by aliens, they did this, I start to like, I don't necessarily know if I believe all of this because how can someone have so many experiences? But then here I am talking about it, like, now I feel like a fucking hypocrite because if I start thinking about this stuff, I was like, are these experiences? Are these just dreams? Or am I fucking crazy?
yeah.
Like,
You're not crazy, man. I know we gotta run, but I really do think stuff like that is in fact possible, and I really do believe you in your stories. I experienced stuff like that myself. We live in a very old house. It's from 1800 something, so it's a pretty old house. And a few years ago, my wife and I we sat in the living room and we experienced steps coming from upstairs, like heavy
mm-hmm,
steps. It wasn't the dogs. The dogs were with us here, and dogs also were aware of these steps. And we turned off the TV and listened to the steps. Man, it was so wild. And we went upstairs. We found nothing. Um, we went to the attic, found nothing. We also sent the dogs to the attic, and but they sensed nothing, or there was nothing. It happened for a few months, almost every night, almost every night at the same time. We heard these strange, let's call it steps, and suddenly it was gone. So they were gone, never came back. And one time I went into the kitchen at night after a podcast, and on the sink there was a little knife laying on the sink. And when I approached the sink, the knife turned like a compass needle. And I was like, "Whoa, that's wild, man! You better stop,
yeah,
motherfucker, because I'm not don't want to
yeah,
do that kind of shit." Um, it wasn't wind, it wasn't a mouse sitting on the sink or something. It just turned, man. I don't know what could cause a knife to turn. I don't know, but that made me think, man. And
yeah.
another occasion, a door handle moved downwards. Can't explain that too. I was thinking about the cat. Sometimes the cat, a few months before he died, he learned to jump doors and open doors by
Mm-hmm.
himself. And I thought maybe it was the cat, but the door handle snaps back up if you let go of it. So, but it went back up like very slowly. So that was strange. Yeah.
Yeah.
Therefore, I feel you, man. Stuff like that is crazy. And you gave me some serious goosebumps when I listened to your story right now. I can tell you that, man.
When it comes to my children, like I'm gonna do whatever I gotta do. People are like, oh, you need to move. I was like, I don't need to move. They need to move. This is my house.
Right.
I'm not just gonna move because what if it's something that just keeps following? You can't just keep running away from it.
Yeah.
So it needs to leave, not us.
I think, yeah, I think that's the right thing to do. And we should always keep in mind that maybe it's just like we've talked about before. Maybe it's us in some strange kind of way. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's not the right thing to do to leave the house and move because I
The
think.
whole three
Fine.
scratch marks though on my daughter, that does not make it in the saying she's mine. That is not a very good
Oh no.
there's nothing good about that. I not to be the religious person, but the number three is always mocking if you listen to the whole like the demon thing. It's
Right.
mocking the trilogy, or the Holy Trinity, I mean. So I don't know what I'm pissing around with, but again, that was the only time that we've ever had anything physical happen like that. But now I've got random teeth popping up in the last 2 months.
Man, that's some crazy shit, man.
I will
Man,
send you those photos of the teeth when we're done.
yeah, please do that. I'd like to see them.
You know,
But anyways, we gotta run, man. You gotta pick up your kid, and thank you so much for sharing all your stories with me. That was awesome, man. Had a lot of
and not
fun.
a problem. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Please, before we go, tell people where they can find you online.
If you would like to listen to my podcast, it's called Tinfoil Tales, and you can go to tinfoiltales.com. There is a links on there. It'll take you to whatever, but it's basically available anywhere where you listen to podcast at. So Apple, Spotify, any of those. And then there's also a YouTube channel. The YouTube is just audio. There's no actual video conversations on there. But yeah, pretty much tinfoiltales.com will get you to wherever you need to go.
Yeah, good stuff. Please stay with me for 2 more minutes, okay?
Yep, not a problem.